Welcome to On the House, where we make mortgages simple so you feel empowered when it comes to finding your own dream home. My name's Martyn James, and I've got some fantastic guests here with me today. I've got Majekodunmi from All Things Money, and I'm also here with Gemma Bennett from the Mortgage Mum. We've already spoken to Sarah once in this season, but ladies, lovely to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much for having us.
Today we're going to be talking about first-time buyers and all of the things that you need to know. I want to find out loads about you before we get started. So, Ola, let's talk about you.
Yes.
Tell me all about All Things Money and how you got into this.
Oh, yeah. So I started All Things Money 5 years ago now to teach young adults everything we weren't taught about in school. So it started off from me teaching myself how to invest, teaching my friends, and then realising, hang on a minute, everyone in the UK should know how to invest in the stock market and also manage their finances. Hence why I started filming content around personal finance, and here we are 5 years later.
Now, you make this so easy because I've watched you on social media, and I trained as a financial advisor, and I'm looking at some of the stuff you're explaining and thinking, how has she managed to make that seem so simple? So if anyone hasn't seen it, do actually go and find Ola right now. It's well worth it. Now, over to you, Gemma. You work with the lovely Sarah, the Mortgage Mum, and you've been doing a whole thing about demystifying mortgages and making them more accessible. Tell us a bit about the website and yourself.
Yeah, that's right. So we're brokerage, we're looking at purchases, remortgages, but what we are so passionate about is that mortgages is so much more than money. And what we try and do is educate, empower, speak to people throughout the process. And something that my background before I was a broker was in counselling and actually looking at emotions.
Wow.
And I have yet to find a transaction to do with money that doesn't have an emotion behind it. And it was interesting because I thought the two worlds were quite far apart. But when I started to work with the Mortgage Mum, and over the last 4 or so years that we've been working together, the two are so closely linked. So looking at why people want what they want when it comes to property, why they've got the money they've got, why they maybe don't have certain access to things, it all links with the person. So we take a real holistic view on the person and the journey and the education around it.
Well, I love this because also I think, both of you do a great job in actually getting the message out and reaching out to women and empowering women to this. Because a lot of the time with finance, I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, but it's a little bit, you can sometimes feel like men telling you what to do and what to think. So let's have a look at kind of some of the things that might put people off.
Yes. Because
today we're going to look at first-time mortgage purchases and that whole scary world that people are about to delve into. Ola, what is it that you think that actually scares people about getting mortgages? Is it just that we don't think that we'll qualify, so we don't necessarily try?
There's so many news articles about the state of the property market at the moment. I think young adults feel like it's just going to be impossible for them to actually buy a property, when you actually speak to experts, you look at your finances, it's actually probably more realistic than you actually think. Yes, it might take a little bit longer than it might have had done for like our parents or grandparents, but I think it's a lot more realistic and achievable than people think. But I think that comes down to education and also digesting the news and not thinking or assuming it's all bad news.
Yeah, because it sometimes feels like it's a very big roll of the dice, isn't it? And actually, if you lose, you've lost forever.
Yeah.
But that's not the case, is it?
No, not at all. And I think, like I said, a lot of people, when they finally speak to an expert, they actually realise, oh, I can buy a house. It might not be in 5 years. It might just actually be 7 or 8 years instead. And these are the steps I need to take to actually buy my property. So I think, having these conversations like we are today is so important, just to educate people that buying a house is a realistic goal. It's just about when, which might be slightly different than we had in mind.
So, Gemma, you do an awful lot of work kind of guiding people through the process. What are the questions that you hear from people? What are the things that really worry them?
So I think a lot of the time, first-time buyers don't know where to start. And they almost feel like, I should probably speak to an advisor. But they're worried about, once I've spoken to an advisor, am I then committed? Have I had to put money on the table there? And then I just want to know my options. And actually, the truth is, that's exactly what we're here to do. We're here to look at your case, look at your situation. If it's a now situation, then we'll advise you of that. If it's a future situation, actually, the best journeys I have are with people that maybe weren't ready when we first started speaking, and then I've kind of guided them into, this is what we're looking at, this is where we're going, and then they come back, a year, 2 years later, and I'm invested in that journey with them, and we're working there, and then they get in their property. And I just think that sometimes it's about taking that step to open that conversation. And a good advisor, you will have good conversations with. They're not going to, you don't need to be ready. You're not wasting anyone's time. And at that point, how can you know how much you can borrow, or what incentives are out there, or what deposit you need, or what the process is until you ask? No one's, walking in with that experience as a first-time buyer. So it's okay to ask every question. I remember when I first ever bought a property, someone said to me, now you have to instruct a solicitor. And I thought, what do I instruct them to do? What does that mean? It's a solicitor. Now that is, my everyday. But the jargon that I use every day, I have to be really aware that is not a term you might have ever heard before. So I think it's just, not being afraid to say, I might be interested, and then finding out those questions.
It's so tricky though, isn't it? Because I think sometimes a lot of people, they look for the dream house first.
Yes.
But actually, Ola, do you find that it makes more sense to maybe look at what you can borrow before you kind of set your heart on a home?
Yeah, I think it's really important, like Gemma mentioned, to speak to the expert. So speak from my own experience. I have X amount saved for a house deposit, and I was like, okay, I know what the property market is like in my area, but what can I actually afford, whether it's in my area or outside my area? And that's when I decided to speaking to a mortgage advisor. And so last summer I spoke to a mortgage advisor. He was like, okay, the deposit's great, but because you're self-employed, you need to look at your income. So again, it's now giving me a goal to work towards. Like, yes, okay, my house deposit is fine. What else can I do to achieve actual home ownership? So I think speaking to the mortgage advisors is so important. And like you mentioned, it's not about necessarily being ready, but just know what you need to do to actually get to buying a property, even if it is in the next 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that always kind of scared me a little bit. It was all the additional things that I had to think about and plan for. And Gemma, don't worry, I'm not going to put you on the spot here on this one, but obviously there are things that do need to change about how the mortgage world works. What things would you like to kind of consign to history to make the process go quicker?
Well, it actually is a really good link to what Ola just said. So I've been self-employed my whole life.
Yeah.
And before I worked in mortgages, that was pain to get a mortgage. Now I'm in mortgages, I can speak both languages, and what I see is needed for self-employed people and what the mortgage lenders need. I can see what they're doing, but there are elements of that I think needs fine-tuning, because I understand that the lender needs a certain amount of security, and you can't necessarily go back to the days of self-cert because it didn't necessarily work for security. However, what is really unfair is the majority, in general, there's always exceptions to the rule, but in general, a self-employed person needs 2 years of accounts. And if you've just started, your first year naturally not going to be that good, potentially, compared to your second year. And then there's an average. This is the general rule, not the only rule. So you've got 2 years of getting things prepared. Somebody that's employed can have a contract that they haven't even started yet, and they can get a mortgage on it. So I feel like I don't have the answer, unfortunately, of how you do that, but I'm hoping that someone somewhere can put more of a hybrid option in there, where there's still the security for the lenders, but the self-employed people don't have to, move heaven and earth to get their mortgage. And I'm quite passionate about teaching how to get a mortgage as a self-employed person, but also I'm hopeful that we can find a smoother route, because we're all learning. Everybody's got different jobs these days, such interesting ways of working, that they shouldn't be such an idea that this is a minority. It's not.
It's like a penalisation.
It does feel like that.
Yeah, and it's really tough.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned this, because I'm also self-employed and I've faced this particular struggle. If only we knew somebody who was hanging around number 10 quite a bit lately, like Ola, and to do your part.
You know it's coming. One day, guys. One day.
They won't let me anywhere near it. There you go. So let's go right to the beginning then, and look at the whole process for first-time buyers. Let's start with the thorniest of the questions that I always hear: deposits. Ola, talk me through this. Realistically, what kind of deposit do I need to have in order to get a property these days?
Yeah, so typically 10 to 20% is a good figure to kind of work towards, and that's the average property price that you're looking to buy, I guess. Obviously now lots of lenders may offer like low percentages. So you've got like 0% mortgages now, you've got 5% mortgages. Again, it's really good to speak to a mortgage advisor to see if that's the best thing for you, because not going to go too technical, but ideally you want a high deposit because one, you get better interest rates, and two, it just means you're borrowing less money from the bank. So in an ideal world, you want a bigger deposit. So if you can aim for 10 to 20%, that's a sweet spot. But there are mortgage lenders now that will lend to you a little bit less.
So is it worthwhile, and this is quite a tricky subject, I know, for a lot of people, is it worthwhile gritting your teeth and asking your parents and seeing if they are able to help you? Because I believe that that's where a lot of deposits come from these days.
That's a good question. I'm sure Gemma can kind of jump in as well. But yes, I can see why people will need to lean on parents. And it's great if you are in a position where you've got parents or family or friends that can help you with that deposit. But again, lenders will need to see proof that it is actually a gift and it's not some sort of other lending. So it's not like a loan that you just got from moneysupermarket.com, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's my mother. She's called moneysupermarket.com. But the lenders are available.
Literally. And yeah, so there'll be, again, a lot of red tape around that. They'll want to kind of ring fence that and make sure it's a genuine gift from your family. Again, I'm not too sure how it actually impacts your lender requirements, but I know some banks will be happy to take on gifts.
Yeah.
Do you find that if you do actually borrow some money from family members, generally it's worthwhile having some kind of agreement with the family just in case there are problems further down the line?
It's absolutely worth having the conversation, because even if it's a conversation that leads to a no, we can't do that for you, no. So I definitely think, one, it's worth having that conversation. But this is something that I'm finding really geekily exciting about mortgages. It's actually the innovation. There are lenders that can protect the parents' investments. So, for example, could give. So it is a gift, a lump sum. But it written at the bottom of the contract is if that property is sold, the parent can get that back. That might feel like, oh, I could do that because then I know that if they were to change their mind, then that's a conversation they can have. There are also some lenders that will allow an element of it being a loan, and actually this is brand new. Bring that into repayments and actually allow some of that loan to be paid off, and they've sorted that out. And there are others that can use it as their own sort of savings. So they're putting a lump sum as security. They will be getting that back in a few years' time. The mainstream idea is it absolutely has to be a gift, cannot be part of your loan because of affordability. But what I love is that there are often nuances and there are conversations to have, is all I would say. So having this conversation and seeing if it's possible is absolutely key.
Do you know what? That's a real revelation to me, because I did not know any of this, which is annoying because I've just spoken to Colin about them. But I've watched another one. I think knowing that could potentially sweeten the deal a bit with the parents who might not be happy with your life choices, your home choices.
It could be that you've got a few siblings, and suddenly if they do it for one, they've got to do it for a few, right?
So
and then you've got lots of money that you've got to give out. So it might just be a case of needing them to feel that that security is safe, or maybe there's an agreement, that they need to know that they could have that back if you were to change your mind, or in a relationship that they're not happy with, have they protected their money?
What if we're working on the basis that, people have families who can afford to do this, but lots of people, myself included, don't necessarily come from that background where you can borrow the money. So if you are renting, let's look at things, over a couple of years or so. What can people do to actually get enough money for a deposit or to maximise their savings?
Yeah, good question. So number one is to have that goal in mind, because I've worked with so many people that are like, I want to save for a house. I'm like, okay, great. How much are you saving? And they're like, well, I don't know. So it's really hard to start saving if you don't know what the deposit size you need. So it's really important to do your research. What does 5%, what does 10% look of a property that you're aiming to buy? So I think that's really important to have that goal. And then secondly, have a budget in place. Okay, let's say we need 10K. What does 10K look like? Are you looking to save that over 3 years? If it's 3 years, what's 10,000 divided by 3 years? I'm not going to try and do the maths, but we're going to.
Did you see that look at panic?
Literally, I was like, what's that? And then thirdly, I'd then say look at government schemes that are designed to help you. So there's schemes like the lifetime ISA, which again some people love, some people hate. I have one myself, and basically for every £1 you deposit in that account, the government will top it up by 25%. Now, I'm not sure about you guys, but I don't know any savings account that's offering 25%. Feel free. So if you know the goal is to definitely buy a property, because again, it has some caveats, but if you're definitely looking to buy a property, having a lifetime ISA could be a great idea because, again, you're having that extra boost from the government. So you can put up to £4,000 per tax year. Alternatively, some people have Help to Buy ISAs. They're no longer available to get, but some people do still have that because they put £1 in 4 years ago or whatever it was. And again, 25% top up, things like that. But yeah, alongside that, if you have your lifetime ISA, you may be in a fortunate position to max that out. Also look at high interest savings accounts. Ideally, if you're maybe someone that isn't maybe disciplined to not touch the money, looking at maybe a fixed rate bond account. So it's untouchable for a certain amount of time, but because of those rules, you get awarded a little bit more interest as well. So yeah, those are some of the tips I have.
Perfect. Now, when it comes to actually planning for the future as well, do I actually have to have a property in mind if I want to go and speak to you and the team at the mortgage, or speak to another mortgage broker about my future options? Can I just have a chat about where I'm at and whether it's feasible?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially as a first-time buyer, I think you need to be having the chat first.
Yeah.
It's only really, the process would be, we'd have a chat, and imagine you are ready at that point. We would go through your affordability, your deposit, your, what things are looking like for you. And then you'd have a much clearer idea of what it is you can actually get to. And that's when really you get your decision in principle. Ideally, you're in a really strong position. You're first time buyer, so you've got no chain. You've got the decision in principle, which means that in principle, the lender, someone like myself, has verified everything. The lender is happy, subject usually just to the property. That's like the last bit then. And then they're in such a strong position, not only to look at properties and put an offer in, but to feel really secure in that. And I also think that you're managing expectation then as well, because you're going looking at something that you fall in love with, but actually it's 50 grand over your, your budget. That's going to just feel disappointing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I definitely think actually property last. Get the other stuff sorted first.
That's, again, I love this tip because I'm in the last category. I'll find the dream home and I'm
Literally, I'm all about you every day.
I can make this work. Somehow I can make this. What can I sell?
Was it reverse engineer it? This is where I need to
And the manifestation. Yeah, that's the one I'm going to get.
Yeah.
But it's not going to. You're not going to get offended as a broker if I just come in and I'm not necessarily ready to buy right now. I'm just trying to find out whether I can.
Absolutely not. In fact, I applaud you for being organised. You're making my future job really much easier. So they are my favourite kind of customers that are there to say, right, this is what I want. Let's make a plan. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, okay, let's talk about some of the fun stuff from actually buying a property. New builds or old homes? What are your thoughts, Ola?
So for me, I do like an old home only because I think they come with so much more character.
Yeah.
But there are pros and cons to both of them. So with your new homes, your new builds, obviously you've got the fact that they're more modern, probably less work that needs to be done. They seem to be apparently more energy efficient, things like that. So there's the pros with that. The obvious cons, sadly, when it comes to new builds, the snagging issue. So you might have to get builders back in because they haven't put the light switch on the right way, things like that. So it's really important to bear in mind. And then I guess alternatively with your maybe slightly older homes, they might have more character, but it might cost a bit more to maybe heat because they might be, just how they're built compared to how they are now. But yeah, personally, if I had to pick, it would be an old home.
I think I'm kind of with you as well, actually. How about you, Gemma? What would you choose?
I live in a new build.
Thank goodness I didn't sleep.
Well, it's 6 years old now, actually, but when we bought it, it was a new build. But I'll be honest, I never thought I would. That wasn't something I was on my remit, but I just fell in love with it. And from a mortgage perspective, there are incentives to buying new builds now, where there's always been builders incentives, but there's actually some lenders that are able to make a difference on your rate, so bring your rate right down by using that builder's incentive. It's called Own New, and it's that's not the lender, that's the scheme. The scheme is called Own New. So there are some things that you can look at with that, and more energy efficient, which is obviously really important, especially with cost of living. Yeah. However, with an older property, you will always pay a bit more of a premium with a new build. So an older property, they will always have a bit more, they feel like they've got the more size, don't you? Especially garden size and things like that. And they do have the character. So yeah, it's such a personal preference, but it's so exciting to go looking and see what you like and what you value. But you do need to think about the running costs of things.
For sure. So yeah, I say I'm an old build girl, but who can be picky these days?
So is it worthwhile doing like a list of those things so you can ask those questions when you go around?
Absolutely, because, buying a property is going to be the biggest financial commitment you'll ever make. And as much as we all have the dream and the aspirations, you just go actually out of that for my first home. What is it that's really important to me? And whittle that down, because there'll be things that you can compromise on and things that you really don't want to. It's silly, but sometimes I like a hallway. No, it's not going to be a grand hallway like Downing Street. So I wasn't invited.
That's too mentioned.
You want an invite, nice to this.
So for me, I really like having a hallway and then walking into a room. It's such a silly thing, but it's something that, I visualise that. And so I think, you all have your quirks. It might be because that's what the kind of property you were brought up in, and that's what, you resonate with. So, I think having some things that you think, this is a non-negotiable.
Yeah. What would you look for, Ola?
Garden.
Yeah.
And also just a really big open plan living room space. I think that's like a generational thing now, because I don't think my mother and older generations were really fussed on open plan living, whereas now I would love like a grand living kitchen room, island. That would be the first thing I look for. Patio kitchen behind, not like I can cook, but
I don't know. I actually have to dust my cooker, but that's a separate story that I'll tell you about later. So what were the things that you watch out for, though? Were there any warning signs that you've been looking for when we're talking about people going to look at properties? What are the danger areas?
Good question. So I actually viewed a few properties last year, and where the house is built was really important. So is it prone to flooding? Was it previously like coal mines, things like that?
Yeah.
Damp, really important to see if the house is like liable to damp and things like that, because again, the last thing you want is mold growing in your home when you spent thousands on it. What is the cost of like bills in that building? Especially to maybe it's flat. Is there ground rent? Is there service charge? Exactly. And that was a lot of that. Yeah, actually ruined my affordability, because the service charges these days are just so expensive. What is the area like? Again, really important. How new is the boiler? What's the condition of the roof? Things like that are going to save you thousands in the long run when you moved in. It's really important to think of those questions.
Yeah, that's such a good point that you just raised there, because I live in a building with a flat roof and it cost me a fortune in insurance. So you win some, you lose some. So in terms of fees and things like that, what are we looking at in terms of how much should I put to one side to cover solicitors, survey, things like that?
Yeah, so ballpark figure, if you're just buying a property, I'd say £1,500 to £1,600 for a solicitor. You might find you get some change from that, but not. Surveys wise, at the moment, I'd say an average of £600. Again, they do base it on the value of the property, so it could be a bit less than that, could be a bit more than that. And then if you're going to want to have moving costs like movers, although it's your first property, you might not need that. But then if you're coming from a rented, you will have furniture and things that you want. You might want to allow for that. That's depending on where you are, worlds apart, but a couple of hundred at least for that one. And then obviously stamp duties are there. That beautiful one that's changing. that you might need to be completely up to date on.
Let's get on to the last question there, because I feel that you give me so much advice, I should probably be paying you. So before you bill me, let's start with you. What advice would you say to someone who's a little bit nervous, but they're thinking about looking around for their first home? What tips?
Yeah, really good question. I think firstly, try and ignore the noise of the news. I think especially when, at the time we're in now, I think a lot of young adults think it's impossible. So I think it's really important to ignore the noise firstly. Secondly, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's 5 years, whether it's 10 years, if you want to buy a property, speak to an expert. I spoke to one at the beginning of last year, had a conversation, looked at a few properties and actually realised, you know what, with my budget that I've now been told about, I'm not ready to buy a property right now. So I think at least, again, it's made me think, okay, I've got a couple of more years maybe to work on my years of accounts, increase my income, hopefully, and just build my deposit. So I think, again, speaking to the expert is so important, because, again, most often than not, you'll realise you can actually buy a house. It might not be your dream property, but you realise actually home ownership is really is actually in reach. And then lastly, have that goal in mind. If you now know, okay, I want to buy a property, what is that savings goal? And then just work towards it.
That is literally worth its weight in gold. That's a mind. Gemma, as our mortgage broker and specialist, what would you say to someone who was just thinking about dipping their toe into the waters of this?
So I would absolutely echo that advice. Get informed you know, you want to make an informed decision, so let's get the information. But just to add something there is if this is a green light and we go, okay, let's go. When we're talking about what you can afford from a lender's perspective, let's also think about what do you want to pay each month, because no property, no matter how nice the hallway and the garden, is worth financial stress.
So true.
Okay, so I think that we have to have a conversation about what you want to also be able to afford in your life, and then make those mortgage payments work for you. Everyone at the moment is talking about high rates, and, you know, very well-meaning family members will tell you not to buy because the rates are high. Well, a mortgage is going to last 25 to 40 years of your life. And in that time, you're going to have high rates, you're going to have low rates, you're going to have somewhere in between. You know, I bought when the rates were low, and then now I'm going to have high. If you come in high, you might just get a nice little treat down the line where they'll get some low rates. So really, it's not about the rates. It's about what does it look like for you and your life, your, you know, holistic well-being, and then get in the house. So we kind of got to look at what does the lender think you can afford, but also what do you think you can afford?
And I'm so glad you said that, because I got told that I could borrow X amount, which meant a hefty amount would be leaving my bank account every single month. And as a single self-employed owner, I was just like, Mum, I don't think I'm ready for that. It's a huge commitment, and like you said, it's thousands of pounds that you're actually putting into a property that, with a mortgage, is going to last you 25 to 35 years plus. So I think you need to really think about, okay, because weirdly, home ownership is a goal for so many people. And I don't know if it's their own personal goal or societal pressure. But I think, like you mentioned, actually, what is this house going to cost you on a monthly basis? Because yes, the bank might give you £400,000 to buy a property, but what's that actually look like in your bank account at the end of the day?
Yeah, absolutely. You might be looking at a tenant, you might be looking at all kinds of things. But I think that's a really, really good point, that actually, once you've gone through the process, are you happy with it? Can you do it? And also, if you've got lifestyle changes as well, you know, you might want to get married, you might want to travel around for a bit.
You want to socialise with your friends whilst living in your house. And I think a lot of people sadly have faced that reality where they bought a property, maybe at low rate times, interest rates gone up, and now they can't socialise or enjoy their home because they're just thinking this is such a big financial burden now, and you don't want that.
So Ola, Gemma, I really hope that people watching today will have been empowered by all of the great advice that you've given. And if you want to watch more of our guides, watch this space.